Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted. Because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. Hello, I'm super excited to welcome everyone today to the podcast. I've got a wonderful new guest today, Brianne Hudak, and we're going to dive into gifted underachievement. Welcome, Brianne. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start off with telling us a little bit about you and how did you first get into giftedness?
Sure. Well, like you said, my name's Brianne Hudak. I have been in education for over 16 years. I've served in public, private, and charter schools. My educational roles have really been quite diverse. I've taught preschool all the way up to the 5th grades. I've taught gifted and talented, single gender, STEM and design engineering, global studies, and theater arts. I've been in administrative roles, including a student activities director. I've been a curriculum and instructional specialist, a dean of students, an assistant principal, and a K through 12 school leader. Currently, I am an educational coach and consultant. I'm an adjunct professor at Western Carolina University, which is in North Carolina in the United States. And I'm a doctoral student of educational leadership, and my focus is on combating underachievement in gifted and talented students. As far as my kind of dedication to gifted and talented, I'm a professional member of and have done gifted presentations for the National Association of Gifted Children, the Social Emotional Needs of the Gifted, SANG, and I serve as their state liaison. I'm a member of the World Council for Gifted and Talented Children and the North Carolina Association for the Gifted and Talented.
Wow. So highly experienced educator and very deep into the gifted community. So what first brought you into the gifted community, or what sparked that interest? Was it teaching those kids?
Yes, you're right. I've always been creative and intrigued and inspired by people who think outside the box. So when I became a certified gifted and talented educator, I really fell in love with getting the opportunity to guide and teach our future leaders and help them unlock their unique gifts and talents by basically finding out what makes them tick. And as an educational leader in general, I'm really passionate about holistic success, and I want to help students reach their full potential through both academic and social emotional strategies and support.
That sounds amazing. And because it is very much about the holistic view, isn't it? Especially with gifted kids, because there's that tendency to go, oh, well, they're just smart kids. But actually, this gifted thing impacts every part of our lives, well beyond just the educational aspect of it. So I love that. And so you've been focusing on gifted underachievement in terms of your doctoral studies. What drew you to that particular topic?
The experience that I've had with gifted and talented students, I noticed that whether they were identified or not, they could really struggle with meeting their full potential or reaching their full potential. And so I just took a deep dive into the research to figure out what is it, what causes underachievement, why the gifted and talented students are affected by it, and how it impacts the rest of their life. So what I found was gifted underachievement in its simplest terms. It's a gap or a discrepancy between the performance and the potential of a student. So a way gifted underachievers are often described is they're a bright child with poor grades. These are individuals that are in education, what I say, hiding in plain sight, and they fail to achieve at a level that is consistent with their abilities. That's gifted underachievement in a nutshell.
And so when we're talking about gifted underachievement, we're including in that box gifted and gifted plus. So twice exceptional, thrice exceptional, the whole kind of community there.
Absolutely, yes. When we're talking about the issue, it's such a big issue because gifted underachievers are making up over 50% of the gifted and talented population. So those statistics are really putting them at risk, and they're at risk for failure. They're at risk for dropout, behavior problem, and even mental health issues. And it can deeply affect the subgroup, like you were saying, of 2E or 3E, twice exceptional learners, because they're not only trying to navigate their gifts and talents, but they're also trying to work through their disabilities. So without this proper identification, interventions, and support, gifted individuals who have underachievement, they really have a love for learning, but they can slip through the cracks in education, and they're never going to reach their full potential because nobody identified them having this issue.
And like you say there, it's a huge issue because the impacts, and you've already said, can affect mental health in terms of underachievement, not reaching their potential. And when we say this, it's really big stuff that's not to be sniffed at. Like we're talking about the trajectory of these young people's lives.
Yes, and you and I are coming at it from a global perspective. It's not just happening in North America. It's a global issue affecting gifted students everywhere. It doesn't matter their background. It doesn't matter where they live. It is a concern regardless of who they are and where they come from.
Yep. And so some folk might think if you're gifted with a disability, then yeah, all right, that might be understandable that there's underachievement, which is obviously inequitable. But it's also important to note that this degree of underachievement is also rife within that gifted population that doesn't have those challenges as well. Just being a gifted kid can leave you very exposed to experiencing underachievement during your school.
Yes.
Okay, well, what does it look like? What are some of the red flags that educators and parents might be able to look out for if we have a look at gifted kids starting from a young age and working our way up?
Underachievement is not a one-size-fits-all issue. I think that's the first thing to lay out. It looks different for different people, which is why it can be hard sometimes to identify or recognize. But I like how you put it. There are some red flags that educators or families can look out for. So first, you can look at performance data, being really careful, again, to look out for those gaps and discrepancies. For example, let's say you're looking at IQ scores and you're comparing them to standardized test scores. If you see a gap and discrepancy in there, it could be a red flag if they don't align. Other things you can do, you can review in-class tests versus the standardized tests, or you could do in-class tests versus scores. You could compare project grades to test grades. You could compare how the student does on a computer test versus how they do on a written essay. Again, trying to find those gaps and discrepancies. And if you find them by properly analyzing the data, because these are written, those are documented inconsistencies, and they can be really vital and essential to bringing up a concern to others and helping to start advocating for and supporting the gifted underachiever.
And I think for parent, I know with my own children, a lot of it is gut instinct, being aware of what a child's intellectual profile is, and then going, doesn't feel like we're anywhere near what that potential could be. What's the best way for a parent to approach educators if they have those concerns?
Well, I think that's a great question. And it piggybacks into what I was thinking about next. So after you've analyzed the data, then you've really got to take the deep dive into the student. And that deep dive is going to reveal their characteristics. So what you're talking about is being able to use data to guide again and address a concern or bring up the concern. The next piece I think is key, because then it's what characteristics are you seeing or how are they feeling about things? So when you're looking for specific characteristics for gifted underachievement, you want to be thinking, are they perfectionists? Are they afraid of failing? Or do they just opt out and not want to put forth the effort because of that perfectionist feeling? Are they extremely bored? Are they unchallenged? And that leads to little or no effort put forth. It leads to disruptive behavior, that don't seem to care attitude that you might see. There's anxiousness too. Do they get too stressed? Do they get too nervous? Are they too self-conscious to really be themselves? Or are they conforming to norms or behaving like the quote unquote average student? They just want to fit in. They don't want to be different. They don't want to stand out. Maybe they read a book a day at home. Their families say, gosh, they can zip through a book so fast, we can't believe it. But in school, the teacher might say, I can't get them to even pick up one of my standard classroom book. They might show a lot of interest in something like computer engineering. Nothing pertaining to that curiosity is available in their school. So again, we're just looking for these gaps and discrepancies, and you're peeling back the onion layers. You're going past the data and finding out what, again, makes them tick, how they operate and how they feel about things. And those can all be red flags that would require educators to have to build those positive relationships with the learner so that they can better understand and assist them. And like you were saying, for families who are knowledgeable and willing to advocate for their child to ensure that the child is receiving proper education and support that is tailored to their abilities.
We talk about this a lot on the podcast. It comes back to that teamwork and partnership between the family and the educators, having good communication, listening to each other, and being open to the challenge of figuring out what's going on and actions can be taken to improve the situation.
I was just going to add, I think that the support team is so essential, and it's a missing piece a lot of time with underachievers, because you need that support team. You need an educator, you need a specialist, you need somebody familiar with gifted and talented education. You need the students' input and feedback as well, and you need the family. So when everybody comes together with their own perspectives and their own feelings and thoughts on education and schooling and learning, then you can create a really cohesive team that is trying to move the student forward to help them reach their full potential.
Yeah, definitely. Working as a team. One of the things that came to mind when you're talking there was that sort of fairly classic scenario where a gifted child gets bored, doesn't perform, and what they really need is harder content. But they can often get trapped in that scenario where it's like, well, if you can't do this work, the educator might think, you're not demonstrating to me that you can do harder work, and you get in this catch-22. And that plays into this sort of conundrum, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And what I have seen just in my own educational experiences is an educator in that situation has to be able to pull those components in, those elements of data, because when they review the data, they can see the performance levels and have that positive, open relationship and be able to communicate with the student. Why are you not feeling great today? What's going on? Don't just tell me you're fine. I know there's more to this. And just really having an open, candid conversation to help the gifted individual reveal what's really going on, so that, again, that support team can come in and say, we can address this now because it's out there, and we can explore it, and we can do what we need to do to meet the needs of the student.
Yeah, absolutely. So gifted underachievement, there's a lot of research and data there that suggests that it impacts a really huge number of gifted students. It doesn't just stop at school though, does it? When we previously talked, you suggested this continues and also impacts college students and even adults. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think, like so many issues, the earlier a person is recognized as an underachiever, the sooner the interventions can be put in place to support them and point them in the right direction. Goes through their whole academic career not living up to their full potential or having their insecurities just exacerbated year after year, then when they move into higher education, it can prove to be quite a difficult transition. Gifted students develop asynchronously compared to their peers. So they need that extra support in learning how to explore and understand their gifts and talents, along with their areas that are needing improvement. So underachievement interventions always include helping to equip the students with those skills and tools that they need to stay organized, to properly socialize, to be able to self-regulate, engage in collaborative or leadership opportunities, and learn how to goal set. And those are just key strategies for university students. And if you don't address those, it can lead to some pretty tough times going out on your own. And for gifted individuals that are underachievers, it can cause shutdowns, even departures from higher education, because they don't feel confident, they don't feel like it's a good fit for them, and they don't know how to navigate.
I can imagine if you're a gifted child, you've gotten through schooling and potentially underachieved or haven't learned a lot of those skills that relate to learning how to actually learn, when you get to university or college and the stakes are a bit higher, the demands are higher, then you literally don't know how to study. You don't know how to do the work because you've never been in that situation where you've been pushed to that level. It's a recipe for disaster, really, isn't it? Like in terms of being able to reach that potential as an adult and moving into areas that might have been something amazing to do for that particular child.
Yes, I've talked to some of my former students that went on to college and spoke to me about their experiences. And a word I would hear from them a lot is overwhelmed. It was just because of what you said. It was, I don't have the necessary tools and skills and abilities to confidently go into this. A gifted student thinks black and white. They think point A to point B. They don't want to have to go through a lot of processes or understanding. They either get it or they don't. And the underachievers, the different characteristics that we talk about play into that: perfectionism, boredom, just fear of failure, anxiety, just those kinds of things come up. And like you said, putting them all together, it's a recipe for disaster. And it's a recipe that hinders our society because we lose and we see those students just slip through the cracks. They either just get by, slide through, or they leave altogether because, again, they just don't feel it's a good fit.
And I think this is a really important conversation for me because so many people are under the misunderstanding that gifted students are high achievers, so that all the high achievers at a school are the gifted ones. And that's the kind of definition of giftedness. And it's a really important distinction to understand that it's literally a difference in brain wiring. It's a way of being. And because of that mismatch that students so often experience at school between what they need and what they get, so many of them don't have that opportunity to reach their potential. And I'm just wondering, in the research that you've done on underachievement, did anything come as a real surprise to you? Did you have any of those moments when you're diving into this topic that just really impacted you?
Yes, I was really blown away by what it looks like in adults. So continuing our conversation on, once they're done with higher education and they're ready to step out into the real world, into adult life and into the professional environment, how that having giftedness and gifted underachievement affects them. Gifted adults have actually expanded the research on gifted and talented education. We are wanting to know now how giftedness impacts entire lives and well-being. And so the same research can be done in adult gifted underachievers. You want to know, how does this issue impact their lives and well-being? And again, it's the longer underachievement goes without proper understanding and interventions and support, the bigger the effects are going to be. So underachieving adults might find social situations and communications very difficult, along with even having trouble finding a job that's going to meet their intellectual and creative needs. They might struggle with mental health issues, anxiety, and even depression because something that is missing for them. They feel like they're not successful, they're not accomplished, they're not understood, they're different, they're awkward. Just a lot of things come up. And it takes a toll on one's health and well-being, and it just results in unsatisfactory or even poor performance when they get into the workplace. It's just astounding to know how it can trickle into adulthood, because it's always been a topic that's K through 12, but now it's really expanding into gifted and talented education at the higher education level. And then now we're saying, what is giftedness, or what does a gifted underachiever look like as an adult? How is this going to impact them?
And so how do we combat that? Like you talked about that a little bit, but what can we do about this?
How do we tackle this? Causes of underachievement, they center around educational settings and support. And we touched on this earlier. It doesn't matter if you're in North America, if you're in Australia, wherever you are. Gifted individuals, more than 50% of them can suffer from gifted underachievement, regardless of background, regardless of who they are. It's really about the educational setting and the support that they get. If a learner is not in an inclusive environment with like-minded peers, and that environment provides equitable programming while offering that social emotional support, they're not going to feel properly recognized. They're not going to feel understood and appreciated. And we know, again, how important that is to your well-being and your self-confidence. If you don't think people understand you, if you don't think you understand the world, if you operate differently than the average, and you're an outlier. If you look at the normal bell curve, gifted underachiever, and gifted students are on one side of the spectrum. They're not falling in that normal range. It's detrimental. It can hurt. It just doesn't feel right. So that's where advocacy and that support team we've talked about are so important. The more we can help people become aware of and understand the gifted and talented population, the more we're doing to ensure that they're getting the appropriate content and instruction that's going to move at their pace and ability levels and tie into their interests to keep them motivated and engaged. And that support team, that can help them better navigate the world around them, better understand the world around them, aid in their skills development, and just help them embrace their gifts and talents and focus on their strengths and abilities. So I think that's how we really combat underachievement.
And as you're talking there, I'm thinking, like, yeah, as you said, this is a global issue. I'm yet to come across a country that is getting gifted education right. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, my country is like, darn, get in touch. We want to know what you're doing, because I've talked to people all over the world. I'm yet to find anyone who's really getting this right. And it's one thing to have that infrastructure in place. That is essential and that is desperately missing. But what has to come along with that is the shift in mindset. And something that you said earlier that made me think, we can have the structures in place, but if it's still taboo to be smart, if our kids are still going to get grief from going to that pull-out class or whatever for being different, for being the smart kid, if it's still not cool to be different, if it's still not cool to need different things, or if we don't feel like we can fit in and belong just being who we are, then even having the infrastructure in place isn't enough. So it's like we need these two things together. We need systems in place that actually will create equity within our education systems and provide that learning that our gifted kids need. But at the same time, we need a complete shift in understanding, acceptance, inclusion, valuing of everyone is different and it's okay to be different. And it's okay if you're really smart and good at this thing. There has been a huge taboo and penalty for, I don't know, ever. I'm just going to go, I don't know how long, just forever, of being that super smart kid. There's so much insecurity of others to penalize and attack that neurotype, that persona. And here in Australia, it's actually a researched phenomenon because of the way Australia developed through our convict past in terms of white Australia. There is actually a well-researched phenomenon about cutting the tall poppies down. And unfortunately, that applies to this sort of intellectual academic tall poppy. You can be a great sports person and excel at sport, and you will be applauded and encouraged, and people just love that. You can be the tallest poppy in the world if you're playing some kind of sport, but if you're just like good at math or science or whatever the hell it is you're good at, you don't get the same appreciation of that difference and just appreciation of just bringing something different into the world. We really need both, don't we?
We do. And I think you hit the nail on the head, just kind of expanding the knowledge of giftedness. When it was first being talked about years and years and years ago, it was intellectual giftedness. It was your genius students, your bright students. Mm-hmm. And now we have to have conversations that expand that to create more equity and inclusiveness. We have to say it could be artistically gifted students. It could be students that are really gifted and talented in leadership. It could be athletics. There's just a lot of different ways that we can look at giftedness, and we can help those students to continue to develop those talents and abilities. I think here in America, you were talking about Australia. In America, it's kind of aligned with what you were saying. For so long, the traditional schools were standardized to the average. Everything was very normal, average, one size fits all. And it was not paying attention to, again, that outlier group on both sides. And what's happened is there's an ignorance and naivety about students that are advanced and that are high learners. And it's the belief that they'll be fine. We don't need to push them. We don't need to do anything extra with them. They're already advanced, so they'll just get by. They don't need anything to help. What you said earlier was just a perfect tie-in, because it's not just they're faster or they're brighter. It's their brains think differently. They operate differently. They perceive the world and situations differently. They're more sensitive to things. They're more creative. And for average society, what we need to do is educate. Educate, and explain this population. Talk about it as much as possible. Talk about how it's not a daunting task. It's going to help our society. It's not just one more thing on a plate. It's a population of people that are our future leaders and going to be productive members of society. So we have to do the right thing for them to positively impact our world and the future.
As a community, we need people who think differently. That diversity is absolutely integral to everything. If you look at companies and board levels, those boards that have diversity in terms of gender and ethnicity and skills, those companies do better. And the research is quite astounding. And so it's valuing that diversity. I'm not interested in astrophysics, but we need people who are, or we need people who maybe don't have a particular specialization, but are generalists and just approach things and think out of the box and differently, so they can ask those questions, push those boundaries.
Yes. And I think too, it's encouragement for them. We need to look at it as, that's amazing, that's inspiring, that's intriguing. You make me want to learn more. I can learn from you. Or just having deeper discussions, meaningful conversations with gifted students about their passions and their thought processes and how they perceive the world. The conversations I've had in my life with gifted students is mind-blowing. It really opened my eyes and gave me broader perspectives and motivated me to want to do more and be more for them and for my world. So instead of looking at it as this group over here that's doing fine, we really don't know what to do with them, we just hope they do their best, give them a thumbs up and a pat on the back and, hey, good job. No, it's what we've been talking about. It's programming, it's social emotional support, it's goal setting, it's everything together to make sure that they appreciate their gifts and talents, and the rest of the world does too.
Absolutely. And so I think the message of this episode really is for educators, who are the underachievers in your class? Who are those kids if they haven't already been identified or diagnosed? And for parents, it's that imposter syndrome, potentially, of that gut feeling, I know my kid's different, but they're actually not doing that great at school. So maybe they're not particularly smart. Actually, these kids are very likely to be gifted and just not thriving in that environment, not being able to show what they can do. And there's a lot of them. Like you said, when we started out, was it 50%? So we're talking huge numbers of students all over the world. If anyone can just walk away going, oh, okay, I'm going to look twice now. And it's not just about those kids who are in the classroom achieving well already. It's who else is in the classroom not engaging, not achieving. And like you said before, maybe that manifests in terms of behavior or mental health, or just going under the radar. Maybe there isn't those obvious red flags. Maybe they're just hiding in plain sight. But it's really opening up that definition of what does gifted look like, doesn't it?
I think too, it's not being intimidated of somebody different than you, not being intimidated by somebody who is advanced. I've had conversations with teachers where they were in elementary grades and the students were working at the middle and high school level. They felt like they didn't know how to get there. They didn't know, what more can we do? I can only take them so far. I challenged those conversations because I would say, you can always take somebody further. Even if that person has, quote unquote, more intelligence than you or creativity than you, you can still steer and guide them in positive and good directions. You can find online courses. Technology is a wonderful thing that can support their interests and provide them with challenging opportunities. You can be their ear for them, to have someone listen to them and just be there for them and advocate for them. You can help the families that are sitting at home struggling because they don't know quite what to do with the child. They're stressed and they only want what's best. What can we do to help them move forward and reach their full potential? And if we discover them, instead of just saying, I don't know what to do, ask the child, ask the support team, what more can I do? What do you need? So exploring, discovering, learning through them, growing from them, being inspired by them, it's going to help them become better, and it'll help you become better in return.
That's really beautiful. At the end of the day, ask the kids, absolutely, because they're going to have some thoughts about things. And I agree, it can feel intimidating when we get stuck in conversations about intelligence and IQ and stuff like that. But as adults, the one thing we have that children do not is life experience. It's that wealth of life experience, and we can always bring that to the table. One of my children in particular definitely knows a ton more than I do about all sorts of things, but I bring life experience to the table all the time. They're still children. They need our guidance, our support to navigate through life and growing up. And so there is always something of immense value that every educator, every adult can bring to a gifted child, because they're not okay. They're smart, they'll be fine. They're not. They need us. They need us to show up and turn up. And I'm thinking as well, if you're listening to this as an adult, or if you've got a college or university aged child, that's just even harder, isn't it? That particular journey of, I've had a lifetime of underachievement, never having those needs met, never learning some of those skills that I now need, not knowing who I am. That's a hard journey to then.
It is. And I think that's where therapy, that's where mentorships are really powerful and important, because it gives them an opportunity to unpack how they're feeling about everything and talk about their struggles. And they may have never had the opportunity to do so before because they were underachievers. And again, it goes back to listening to them and helping them goal set and helping them get the tools and resources needed to stay organized and stay comfortable and confident and grow that self-awareness so that they feel happy, because happiness is key. If you're happy, you breed happiness to others. And so if a gifted student feels confident, proud of who they are and what they can do, they're going to go into situations and they're going to just exude those feelings onto others. And it's a win-win.
Absolutely. And I think it can be validating to know, if you've reached adulthood at whatever age, validating to know and have someone say that actually it has been hard. You haven't got what you needed. Your challenges are real. Your struggles are real, and validate the difficulty and the impact on your life, relationships, mental health, all the very many things, health, just body wellness. Have that validation from an external source that this is all very real. And you've got good reason to potentially not be in a great place. And like you said, therapy, you've got stuff to work through. You've got probably some grief there, probably a bit of anger, a lot of hurt, definitely a journey there to work through, and then you pick yourself up and go, okay, where do I go from here? And in terms of that kind of adult piece, there are some folk out there doing things in that space, not huge numbers. Into Gifted has great blogs and information aimed at adults, so they're a really great place to go look for information. Julie Skolnick with Understanding Comes Calm, she's also got great resources around twice exceptional adults. So if you're gifted and a bit quirky, but maybe not even formally diagnosed in anything, that can be something to explore. So it is quite the journey, and it's worth doing for your own happiness and well-being. But like you say, if you're a parent in particular, how that can manifest in your parenting or just life in relationships in general. I guess to just really validate, like, it's a huge life-altering situation to be in, being gifted underachiever, and the way that you've potentially ended up in that space. It's heartbreaking, but also reassuring to know there's a ton of research out there just backing that up.
You're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think it's a call to higher education. you got to take a positive spin on things. What the pandemic has done is in education, it's opened doors and conversations to the need for not only academic support in schools, but social emotional support. That's a call, gifted underachievers and anybody that is struggling to transition to higher education. It's a call for social emotional development to be brought into that setting as well. When you come to school, giving them a mentor, a therapist or a psychologist that comes in and just does check-ins or talks and conversations with how everybody's doing and how are you feeling and what was your background coming into the university and what are your aspirations? What do you want to achieve here? So that people can get on the right track from the start and they know somebody's there again to listen and help. Another positive spin from the pandemic has been opening more doors to different and diverse groups within our society, just in general. And so I think it's a really good time right now for advocates of the gifted and talented community to speak up and say, don't forget about this group too, as we're really trying to become more equitable and inclusive. Let's not forget about our advanced learners because they're not okay. They require extra supports too. They think differently, and we have to recognize that and do what's best to help them reach their full potential.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a huge issue. It's literally from our very little ones to our very old ones, lifelong impacts. You're definitely not alone, whether you're a parent with a child who is underachieving or a college, university age child who is underachieving, or frankly, an older child who's just not quite getting traction in life, or you yourself are not quite getting traction in life. You are not alone. There is like this systemic issue around you that has impacted that. And so the question is, what can we do about it? I think that, as you've said, starts with understanding exactly what we can do for this particular individual and then make some action plans beyond that to help people reach their potential. And I think when I talk about this idea of reaching potential, for me, that's about just thriving, just having that opportunity in life to thrive as your best self, like as who you are. So for me, it's less about, all the great things that gifted folk could do. There is that potential, but whoa, that's a lot of pressure, right? How about we just start with, let's thrive and be happy and love what we're doing and have great relationships? Because I think if you start there, the other stuff will come in whatever way, shape, or form it's going to come. But if the goal is just thriving and having that opportunity to be our best selves and feel like we're using all of ourselves in something. And I've definitely have had spaces in life where I'm like, I'm just not using all of myself in this and it hurts. And it's like being able to move through that into a place where you feel like you're in flow and really giving all of yourself. I think we're wired to want to really dig in and show up in that particular way. And so it does hurt and impact mental health when we can't be in that place. So thank you so much for today. Is there anything that you would just like to leave us on? Because it's such an important issue.
When we're talking about reaching our full potential, to me, it's not making an A in class or getting the highest score on something. What it's about is finding meaning and finding purpose. Because when you have meaning and you have purpose and you have passion for something, happiness comes, and happiness is the key. And like I was saying earlier, when you're happy, you flourish. Domino effects to everybody around you and the positive vibes come out. And so to anybody who is an underachiever or knows an underachiever, I think the biggest takeaway is tap into those two different areas of identifying, recognizing, and intervening. Make sure you've got data because documentation is essential to be able to show those gaps and discrepancies, but make sure that you've taken that deep dive into the person to really understand how they think and what they feel. And once you've done that and you've built that positive relationship, you're going to be trusted by the gifted underachiever, and you can work on those action steps and those action plans and goal set with them to take the step-by-step approach, celebrate the small wins, and use growth mindset and that positivity to get them to a place where they can celebrate success and flourish.
Beautiful. Yeah, definitely. That's a lovely note to end on, because it's all just about flourishing. I usually wrap up by saying, who do you work with? How can people find you? But you're in the process of finishing your doctorate at the moment.
On my educational consulting side, I offer training, coaching, and development in educational leadership, as well as understanding the nature and needs of the gifted and talented and the best practices to support them. My website is www.helpmehudak, and Hudak is HUD as in dog, AK.com. So helpmehudak.com. And from there, I can provide expertise and help to educators, to specialists, to families and students by shining a light on this population and moving the gifted community forward.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. I'll definitely put those links in the show notes. And I'm assuming there are various services that you can do online, reaching that global audience, as well as, like you said before, you do a lot of work with SENG and other organizations as well.
Yeah.
We need the helpers. And so I love finding folk that are out there working in this advocacy space and available for people to reach out to, whether you're a parent or a school or whoever, to just access that guidance and knowledge. So thank you so much for doing that and coming on today and talking about such a huge, big, important issue. I'm so pleased to have had this conversation and really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophia, thank you for always providing through your podcast great insight and just really candid, transparent conversations for this community to support them as well. So thanks for all you do.
Oh, thank you very much. That's lovely. We'll probably see you again talking about different topics as well. It'd be lovely to have you back.
Thank you. I would greatly appreciate that and enjoy the time.
If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.